Welcome to Cybersecurity Where You Are, the Center for Internet Security's podcast. I'm Sean Atkinson, CISO at CIS.
And I'm Tony Sager, Senior Vice President and Chief Evangelist at CIS. Cybersecurity affects us all, whether we're online at home, managing a company, supporting clients, or running a state or local government.
So join us on Wednesdays as we discuss trends and threats, explore security best practices, and interview experts in the industry.
Together, we'll clarify these issues, creating confidence in the connected world.
Hello and welcome to the show Cybersecurity Where You Are. I'm Sean Atkinson, CISO here at the Center for Internet Security, joined by the host with the most, the difference maker, the Hall of Famer, Mr. Tony Sager. Tony, how are you, sir?
Great, Sean, and great to be back on the air with you.
Absolutely. Got a very, very interesting topic today. Strengthening critical infrastructure for state, local, tribal, and territorial progress and priorities. A study that was put together by the MS-ISAC, and we have our members representatively of that team here, Terry Loftus and Netta Squires. Netta, Terry, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Netta, would it be okay just to give us a quick introduction about yourself and your involvement in this study?
Sure. So first, thank you for having me today. I was a member of the MS-ISAC for many years as a local and then as a state entity, and then had the pleasure of serving together with Terry as a member of the MS-ISAC Executive Committee, and now have the utmost pleasure of consulting for CIS and the MS-ISAC. And so in the fall of last year, 24, the MS-ISAC Executive Committee decided to commission a study about the cybersecurity perspectives of its community. And so I helped support the Executive Committee to put together the study across all of our members, supporters, across all of our SLTT members.
Wonderful. Thank you, Netta. Terry, a quick introduction and your involvement in the study.
Happy to, Sean. Thank you to you and Tony for having us today, and to be able to talk a little bit about something that's near and dear to our hearts and to a lot of our members across the nation. Yes, Terry Loftus. I have the privilege of serving as the Assistant Superintendent and Chief Information Officer here at the San Diego County Office of Education in California, and have been a MS-ISAC member or consumer of all the great services and resources from MS-ISAC for many, many years, and joined the Executive Committee just over 2 years ago, and I have the pleasure of currently serving as the chair. And yes, to Netta's point, the studies, the feedback, the collaborative approach to everything that MS-ISAC does with and for the SLTT community is really built on trust, and this is one of those examples of really doing some deep research to get an understanding of where folks are at, not just in their cyber journeys as their organizations, but also more holistically looking all across state, local, tribal, and territorial. So, and looking forward to getting into some of the details of the report as we go through today.
Wonderful. Well, starting with that, Terry, when the report itself coming together identified, several foundational security challenges that face SLTTs, what we use as the acronym for state, local, tribal, and territorial. Could you identify now through this respective study how, one, those were representatively identified, and then through this respective study, they were really a number of different elements that you had called out, and respectfully the team putting this together had called out. But what are those foundational security challenges that you're seeing?
That's a great question. Really, at the 64,000-foot view, Sean, we're looking at a number of things that are common across sectors. So yes, the report itself, we have a short version and a very lengthy version with lots of data and elements that Netta and others put together, which is fantastic. And really, if we were to look at what it all distills down into, there's about 5 or 6 things that really hit home for all of our members. So first and foremost, state, local, tribal, and territorial, those domains is where critical infrastructure resides. And sometimes folks look at the 16 sectors of the critical infrastructure sectors, and they think that's something separate and distinct. But if we think about small and public healthcare providers, water, wastewater facilities, emergency services, government facilities like K-12 schools, those are all examples of being within the state, local, tribal, and territorial community that are indeed critical infrastructure. So it's not something separate. It is very much what folks across the nation lean on and need to utilize on a regular basis as far as engaging with state, local, and even federal resources. So that is a key element. The other element of that is that unfortunately SLTT is R&D targets of increasingly sophisticated cyber threats, physical risks, including even nation-state sponsored attacks. So again, we're thinking about organizations, big to small, across this nation that are serving everyday Americans that are indeed targets to a wide array of threat actors. And which kind of leads to the next element, which I think everybody could make an argument that they are maybe not, that they're under-resourced or don't have the people, the tools, the funding that they need when it comes to cyber. But if we take for a moment and really look at SLTT, we are wildly under-resourced against these threats. And so commonly, and maybe we'll talk about this a bit later, but one of the focuses or goals of the MS-ISAC is really being conscious of the cyber underserved. Those that if you're in a small community, small town, small water facility, those are the organizations, the agencies that are targeted and really don't have the tools and resources they need to respond. Now, I will touch on a couple positive things because there are some good feedback as well from the broader membership. And our members were very vocal about the fact that noteworthy investments and best practices have been put into play by the MS-ISAC that really are making the difference. So I won't get into each of those now, but overarching, the feeling is that the MS-ISAC is not only a trusted partner, but a very valuable partner when it comes to addressing these cyber challenges. And then lastly, the community feels like these services or these, cyber defense accelerators, if you will, must be sustained, and that, priorities must be pursued to advance SLTT security more broadly.
Yeah, and if I can just, sort of just touch more on what Terry just said, the survey itself, right? So the way we did the methodology, first of all, for the study itself on which the report is based on, was we provided a study or a survey that went out to 11,000 members who were primary members of the accounts, of which about, we had about 650 respondents. And then we also did focus groups, right? So we took, and this was all sent out to the various sectors. So we had our state, our local, tribal, territorial, but then we also had judiciary, K-12, education, water sector, right? So we went across the critical infrastructure that falls underneath each one of these local or these governments. And then based on both the focus groups and the study, we were able to really get a lot of information and really understand some of those basic challenges that are causing these foundational or the basic reasons for these foundational security challenges, right? So, thinking about, first of all, just looking at the data, right? Over 40% of the entities have less than $100,000 a year, right? And over 22% have zero dedicated budget. So we're talking about these, extreme funding challenges across the entire sectors, SLTT sector. Nearly half of respondents said that they have zero full-time cybersecurity staff, right? So a lot of these organizations are cobbled from, you have like one security person, maybe, or they are the network engineer, and they are also, they're also just security by virtue of the fact that they know anything about security. And so that's really challenging. Also, a lot of the smaller and the rural jurisdictions really lack access to basic tools, right? Basic training, strategic guidance. They don't have the same resources like the sort of some of the larger, better resourced organizations. And part of that is also a result in kind of number 4 is this fragmented governance, right? So we see this sort of there isn't any centralized, not any, there is some, to Terry's point about good points. There are definitely some models that are working great where that is being centralized. But in most cases, there is this sort of fragmented governance structure. And on top of that, you have super outdated infrastructure, of course, workforce shortages. And so it's creating these systemic vulnerabilities that when tackled individually by each one of these organizations seem just impossible, right? And so we definitely, we saw these are just some of the challenges, but then out of that, we also saw some really innovative and exciting opportunities for how states are tackling some of them.
Yeah, I think, so the backdrop of the report and the sort of foundational thing for folks that both, you guys have lived this as a day-to-day thing. We see it, obviously, the challenges, in terms of operating the ISAC. But, when you say under-resourced, my first contact with the ISAC, I came as a speaker at the ISAC meeting in, I think it was 2008. And over lunch, I came from a giant federal agency where they whine all day long about lack of resources. And then I'm talking to it was a woman who ran the search for a mid-size U.S. state. And I asked her what her training budget was for a year. And it was just eye-opening, because it wasn't enough even at that time to buy a course from the leading vendor in the industry, a course, much less training for, I think she had 18 people or something like that. And it really helped open my eyes to the challenge. And I think what, Terry's opening point, people don't realize, right? It is not a separate thing. State, local governance and governance underlies our entire economy. And so when we don't pay attention to that, when we don't have confidence in that, when citizens don't believe, that services will be there, we have a problem that cuts across every aspect of our lives. And so I think that, and what's heartening is the receptiveness, right? A lot of the history of cybersecurity is everybody's on their own. Figure out how to defend yourself because you're a special snowflake. But you're telling me the opposite, right? That people are open, they see a commonality, and they're willing to take action to that effect. Is that a fair way to characterize it, Terry, with your opening?
Yeah, I believe so.
And with that, we'll be right back after this quick break. Operating systems in the cloud are vulnerable to malware, misconfiguration, and more. That is, unless you securely configure them. Enter the CIS hardened images. These virtual machine images come pre-hardened to the CIS benchmarks, providing built-in security and compliance you can trust. Available at less than 3 cents per compute hour, CIS hardened images save you time and money managing your cloud security posture. Available on all major cloud service platforms. So spin one up today by visiting cisecurity.org. Thank you, and let's jump back into the episode.
Terry, what are examples of the kinds of things so it's easy to talk about, let's work together, but how about examples of the things that we have seen that where people have shown an openness to that or have created some of these ideas that Netta talked about?
Yeah, so when it comes to that, and when we're thinking more broadly about, how are we doing information sharing, right? How are we doing this in a coordinated way that's beneficial to everyone? That is what one of the key elements that I would point to as being maybe the what I would call a superpower of the MS-ISAC, because when we're talking about information sharing, we're not generally in these cases talking about things that are going well. When we're talking about information sharing, it's about something we've noticed, an anomaly, an attack, something that generally an organization isn't really excited to publish to the world or put on the front page of a newspaper. And so, but that information is, by the same token, incredibly important to the broader community to have an understanding of what's happening. What is the threat landscape? What is happening out there in the real world? So if I'm in K-12, if there's something in another agency that's happening in another state, and I can learn from that, something that is either in progress or has recently happened to them, that can help me in improving my security posture and being prepared for that type of potential attack or whatever the threat is. And so it's critically important that there is that information sharing and understanding that none of that can happen without trust. And so that trust is the superpower, again, in my personal opinion, that the MS-ISAC has built up over 20 years of being in existence, has really been focused on building those relationships amongst the membership, so that information can flow and be honored in the right way, as far as how do we share this, and then how do we take that and push that back out without attribution, so that we can make sure that we're maintaining confidentiality and trust. But that information sharing and that coordinated information sharing truly is valuable to the community. It's also valuable to the community because it's from the SLTT community, right? So if we get an alert from a vendor partner, right, there's a big organization that has maybe a vulnerability in a firewall. That's all well and good and something that it could potentially be actionable. But when you have telemetry, info, insights, essentially from the field, the ground level, from folks that are in the different sectors within SLTT, it's far more valuable to the other members in the ecosystem, because it's not just generic. It's not just a global, hey, let's keep an eye out for this. This is specific to operational technology in a wastewater facility, and so therefore, that resonates with me. I use similar systems or protocols, and so I can then take that, and that is at the end of the day actionable or valuable to me.
Yeah, exactly. And to Terry's point, I mean, cybersecurity threats, right? They cross jurisdictional lines. They don't kind of stop at the border of my jurisdiction. So if we have information sharing in advance, we can mitigate, we can be better prepared, we can, avoid a lot of these, but we can also respond faster, right? When something happens, we can make sure that, we're better coordinated in our response time. You can more efficiently use resources. And the MS-ISAC is really plays this sort of vital, crucial role in these offerings, with its SOC support, the MDBR, threat intelligence sharing. You have actual tools and services that if every one of these sort of, especially the smaller and the under-resourced jurisdictions, tried to do on their own, would be just prohibitively expensive. I mean, they just couldn't do it and they wouldn't be a part of it, which is many are not. And so once they are able to join and be a part of that and get that information and get those services at low to no cost, right? They can really just benefit tremendously, both from the economies of scale, from the actual threat intelligence. Really, like every endpoint that we add is additional security. It helps reduce duplication. It helps reduce the silos. It improves real-time situational awareness. And so and the MS-ISAC, to Terry's point exactly, and I may be biased because I've been a user for many years, but also maybe that makes me objective. But it really, they're a trusted member in this community for over 19,000 members and beyond, right? Because so many continue to hear about the MS-ISAC for many years. They're obviously bipartisan by virtue of them not falling under the government, and I think it really creates this, and we saw this in the study. I think this was one of the most wonderful things. You go into the study and you think, okay, I'll hear the funding, staffing, but what just warmly surprised to hear was how everybody used the word trust, how everybody said trust was important and trust was something that they had. Relationships matter, how they really cared about interactions and being able to collaborate and communicate with the rest of their constituency. And that the MS-ISAC provided that space, right? Whether it's in its meetings, the monthly meetings, whether it's in its smaller cohorts and communities of practice, whether it's at the annual meeting, or even the one-on-one conversations that they can have with members through some of these programs. It really provided that ability to increase that collaboration And also to Terry's point, it's a cohort of members, but everyone has to be part of it to be part of the solution. So you have your federal, you have your nonprofits, you have your private sector, and then you have your local governments, and then you have to go all the way down and drill all the way down to the smallest jurisdiction and its needs. But it all has to come together, and that's what the MS-ISAC is so uniquely positioned at being able to offer, is bringing all of those partner together so naturally and in a helpful way, which helps everyone communicate and coordinate together.
In my first career, I had to take management courses, whether I wanted to or not. One of the things I remembered in human interaction, I think this might have been from the Stephen Covey book or something back in the day, but trust is a function of character and competence. In other words, to create trust, you have to be technically, can you do the right thing? And will you do the right thing? Right? Can I believe in you? That you'll handle my potentially embarrassing information, right, in a respectful way, or that you'll be there when there's an emergency and so forth. And that just doesn't happen, right? You can have high technical competence, but if there isn't a relationship that's been built over time, then you don't get that same opportunity, that same level of human trust. Trust in technology is almost always driven by human beings, right, who decide that they have enough in common that they will open up about problems and that sort of stuff. And I think that's, from the CIS side, we've done a lot of soul searching here also in the complex times we're in, to think about what is it that we bring that's special or unique. And one of them, I think you both hinted at, which is this knowledge of the environment, right? Many of our staff are actually former state officials, local officials, and there's this ongoing conversation of meetings and events and webcasts and all this to develop this knowledge. So as Terry said, we're not a gigantic worldwide vendor sending massive amounts of general information out there. We try to filter that information with knowledge of the environment, right? What do people care about? What's most important? What are the budgetary constraints, the technical constraints? And I think that really is part of the magic of the relationship, between the two. And I'll run one of my taglines by you guys, because I said one of the tricks that the ISAC and its community has pulled off is it has moved from conversational to operational. There's a lot of conversational things. Hey, let's get together once a month and share anecdotes about what did you see, and those are nice. They're conversational, right? But they're not minute by minute operational. I know your environment, you know mine. To build a operational activity is a much more complex and mature kind of response. It's really about a deeply collaborative defense, as opposed to I'm defending myself, but I'm willing to share with you and give you and take from you. That's a good thing, but it's not where we really need to be. And I think that's what I respect so much about the state and local community at large, is this openness to deal with that.
I think you're absolutely right. Trust is that prerequisite for collaboration, right? And then relationships are the prerequisites for trust. And I think sort of that's where we're very uniquely placed, as being able to be a partner to both of those parts, to the relationships and to the competence, to your point, and building that trust, and therefore collaboration, scalable solutions. I mean, and you talk about competence, but it's also, that part of that is the affordability of it, right? Is the ability, the ease of participation, how easy it is to become a member, all the services that come together with that, the onboarding, the someone to speak with, the someone who understands, what your unique circumstances are, because frankly, they are unique, but they're also not, right? They've seen it through, hundreds of other jurisdictions, and they're able to help you immediately with some, easy resources that you can leverage and use. And so, and that solutions at scale is so important, as, we as everywhere, every state is going through this, budget cuts, and every locality is, and reduced budgets, and, of that CARES Act is gone, and, we're seeing federal cuts across the board and grants. We're entering a challenging budget time. And so being very efficient right now with our dollars and our spending is extraordinarily important, and the ability to build solutions at scale. And that's something we also saw in the study. That's something that we saw that jurisdictions want. They want that ability to leverage, to get very sustained funding they can trust, right? Not just a one-time grant for something. Grants are very helpful because they're necessary, but really having a streamlined funding. We saw blended solutions of, general funding together with grants, and then services that you can rely on really help promote that ability to start with a service and continue with it for years to come, and not be like, well, tomorrow I have to switch switch vendor because this grant is going away, right? And again, that's something that I think part of the reason that the MS-ISAC has been so successful is that it has had that stability in what it can provide and what jurisdictions can expect, and over multiple years.
Well, I think it's so important, Netta, that you mentioned that, because as we start to think about the interoperation, state, local, tribal, and the dependencies, it gets to that domino effect of one affects many. And where we want to build resiliency and, as you mentioned, scalability. But Terry, it leads me down a path where what are we doing? And it was a term you brought up, which is in this space so important, is the underserved communities. Really, when we're thinking about building out resiliency capability and trying to meet them where they are, because not representatively, not every organization, not all their personnel are necessarily cybersecurity professionals or defined in resiliency in terms of that training. We've mentioned, in areas, and a priority we need to think about is investment in people as part of that underlying resilient infrastructure. But where do you see, and again, from the report, we look at the priorities in the space, where do you see that need for representatively states to then help support locals that representatively they're dependent upon in terms of provisioning of services, et cetera? Where does that fit into the narrative from the study?
Just to preface, as we dive into this, that itself is an interesting topic, because I would say maybe I'll label it the feedback as opportunities for relationship building, but there is an element of certain cities not trusting or having less trust with a county or county with a state, and so while I applaud state level activities, whole of state approaches, there are still scenarios under which where there is some lacking trust or relationships or other politics or something that is a barrier, or at least is a speed bump, if you will, to working together and supporting the smallest agencies, the most rural communities, et cetera. And again, the report took us back to the value of the MS-ISAC specifically to those underserved, or again, thinking about those smaller organizations or agencies, rural areas, tribal communities, et cetera. Because having a trusted partner, then you open the door to the elements or the resources that add value. So, for example, our smalls, we heard very strongly from them that, the tools and services are of value and are appreciated, including especially things like the malicious domain and blocking and reporting, the MDBR, because that's kind of a set and forget, right? You don't need a cybersecurity team to manage and maintain that. It can be set up in a matter of minutes and provide a level of additional protections or help your organization from certain types of threats. Again, going back to what we touched on before, the cyber threat intelligence is good. It's even better when those notifications and alerts are tailored to those smallest communities. Think about, again, I regularly wear my K-12 hat. We have, small schools and small school districts where people are wearing multiple hats and doing multiple things. They simply do not have the time to go research all of the notifications from all the federal agencies, look at the guidance from vendor partners, look at what's happening in the news, look what's happening. Again, it's a fire hose of all this information that organizations and individuals in those organizations are dealing with. And so if it can be tailored and distilled into cyber threat intelligence that's meaningful to that small organization, that is far more beneficial, because otherwise it's just noise. The other piece too, when we're thinking about our smaller or under resourced, Sean, is the benefits on that Netta talked about, the need for training. professional development, for awareness. Many of these, so many organizations do not have a dedicated cyber person, or if they do, they're an army of one, right? And they may have zero budget for any training or professional development. We all know there's great partners like SANS and others. You can get some real in-depth technical knowledge and training, but the MS-ISAC literally provides hundreds of webinars, trainings, resources, documents, all free to this community that people can access and utilize on a regular basis, again, at no cost. And again, having that kind of trusted partnership with MS-ISAC and entering into an ecosystem of almost 19,000 members, as Netta mentioned, that there as a trust level is rare and unique. And so again, that trust, maybe I'm in a county or I'm at a city and there's maybe a little bit of past friction with a state level group. I don't have that with the MS-ISAC, and I get partnered up commonly with communities of interest or communities of practice where, hey, I'm talking to this other person. I have trust in what they're sharing with me, the recommendations, the thoughts, their approaches. So that's a very wordy way to answer your question, Sean. But yes, the needs of small and rural communities and agencies, they do have their own unique set of challenges, and it was evident in the study that continuing to meet that and even potentially expanding those resources is what they're asking for.
Yeah, absolutely. We become, in some cases, the trust proxy to try and build those relationships and the information sharing. And in a lot of cases, Netta, one of the things is that these are similar problems that contextually they may be different, but ultimately solutions can be fit to for purpose necessarily. And I see that, and you'd mentioned it, and this is just why I'm, wanted to get your thoughts here on that trust element. So important for one, establishing consistency, as you mentioned, the relationship building, and then continuous improvement over time so that we can identify and then provide more assistance across all of the ISACs respectfully, depending on the industrial parenthetic that they fit. But with the MS-ISAC and, representatively the work in the space, trying to hit, across many different contextual elements. And again, to your point, Terry, trying to fit those into, trying to meet them where they are at this point in time, I think creates that conversation, creates that character, creates the competence, and then allows that trust relationship to be built. That then, ultimately there is where we can serve. And really all we're built for is to provide that service, to build that resiliency, and really to protect national infrastructure. Now, does that align with your thoughts and items coming out of the study?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think one of the things that we saw, again, is, some of these great examples of success stories, right, that came out. So, a lot of whole of state or even regional efforts that have been happening, some preceding the term whole of state, right? We see these wonderful investments in workforce development in Maryland, for example, right? The governor investing within both, organizations with the public sector and nonprofits and academia, and bringing it all together to provide ultimately services to all the constituents to be able to have free workforce development throughout the state. In the state of Arizona, we've seen just incredible amount of free services to local communities that are able to take advantage of all of these MDR and vulnerability management and firewalls, and just really extraordinarily supportive. We've seen amazing programs in Minnesota that have, for example, cyber navigators, and really go out and help each jurisdiction be able to understand what are the resources that are available, what are some of their shortcomings, what are some of their the things that they can change relatively easily to gain more security. Florida investing so much money and providing so much money into providing the locals with services. So really nationwide, we're seeing just so many examples of some great investments. There are some states that there are different models that we've seen that work, right? I think we've seen some models that where it's all at the state level and kind of provided as grants. Some are doing it where that's very consolidated by the state and provided to the locals. Others are doing cost share models over time. obviously the SLCGP grant funds were very helpful in supporting some of these whole of state efforts. But, what's important, I think, and pertinent in this conversation is that these need to be shared, right? All of these success stories, we want to highlight them and share them so others can do that. And, one of the things that the MS-ISAC has been doing is exactly that. It's bringing these communities together to share these stories. There are meetings every other week, for example, for whole of state SLCGP meetings so that states can learn and share. I know when I was in my state role at Maryland, whatever some states said, I would quickly write it down and then go and see how it could fit into our model and try to apply it to our locals. So I think it's, that's really the being able to collect all of this information and being able to see what's working now, what's working over time, right? And how can we leverage that at the national level? How can we advocate for that? One of the really amazing things about the MS-ISAC Executive Committee is just their power of advocacy, right? They have a voice, very strong voice, and at multiple levels, at the state level, the congressional levels. They really, and so they can help if they take the time to collect this information, and they help be the voice to explain what is really needed at all these levels. And I think that's really important, right, at all these levels. And, you think of just all the different sort of threats that are being flagged from ransomware to insider threats to, lack of strategic planning. So, for example, 73% of organizations that don't have cyber staff also don't have a strategic plan, right? And so the best way to really make sure that we can have a strategic path forward nationally as a nation is to have a space where we can understand what is happening at all these multiple different facets and level, bring all of those recommendations, conclusion, analysis, findings together and share them amongst each other and see how we can all improve based on that. And then where can we better increase funding at the federal level, at the state level, at the local level, in different, critical infrastructure sectors, and to really better improve and enhance the resilience of the nation. Because it really goes down to what Terry said at the beginning, which is local cybersecurity is national security. And we have to think that way. Absolutely agreed.
Well, Tony, I'm sorry to say that we're coming towards the end of our episode. I wish we could go on, but Terry, if I could ask, is there a final thought that you'd want to leave our audience with coming out of the study or out of our discussion today?
Thank you, Sean. Yes, I would say a follow-on to the study is some recent MS-ISAC member town halls that we've had recently about the study and about changing wins in both at the federal level and even state and local. The MS-ISAC, we've talked about a lot of the strengths today, and I found it really heartening to hear from the membership. So we had on April 1st our first ever town hall meeting with the membership, and we had about 3,000 people show up for this virtual meeting, which was great. And we just asked a few basic questions, and I just would share just a couple of them with our listeners today, which is, the question was, given the interconnectedness of our nation's governments, do you see a negative cybersecurity impact to your organization if the MS-ISAC were not available? Over 95% said absolutely yes. And so again, that points to relationships, a community, resources that have been built up over time to specifically focus on SLTT. That really speaks to the value. The other one was, if you found, the other question was about the engagement support. So stepping outside of the tools, some of the things we talked about earlier about training and resources. We have an incredible cybersecurity mentor program that is beloved. Those types of things. What value do you see in those? Are they valuable to you and your organization? And over 97% said absolutely yes. And again, that's setting aside from just the tools and the SOC and the other elements that come to mind for the MS-ISAC. And really the last one, which kind of goes back to funding and some of the things that Netta touched on, was the question about, okay, so again, if the services went away, could you easily afford, or could you easily find and implement alternatives? And over 80% of the respondents said absolutely not. It would be impossible or nearly impossible, either from a funding standpoint or a staffing standpoint, or other barriers to the tools that they need and value from the MS-ISAC. So I would just close with that, because it was it rang true and very clearly to the executive committee and to folks at CIS and so forth about that MS-ISAC has been on the right track, continues to be on the right track, and that there is a high level of concern as we move forward with lots of changes happening at the federal level.
Wonderful, wonderful. Netta, any final thoughts from yourself?
Sure, thanks. I agree with everything Terry said, but also, I really think national security does start with that SLTT resilience, right? And so we really kind of have to move into that mindset that we have to do this together. We need everybody to be a partner at the table. We need to create the table that allows for everyone to be the partner and make sure we all come to it. And then, really try to think as jurisdictions, as decision makers, lawmakers, right, at the governance level, how can I leverage shared service models? How can I make sure that, I'm not paying prime dollar for something because I want to just be siloed here on my own, but how can I work together and collaborate and really when you enhance these economies of scale, you're also enhancing security. And so this sort of collective defense model. And so really, work on developing these trust-based collaborations, right? And invest in people. I think we've seen that as well. It's not just technology. We really have to invest in the people behind the technology, because that will make or break our ability to do things. And I think really, continue to be part of the conversation. Come to the annual meeting, come to the meetings, come to all the, the monthly meetings, share your stories with us. Tell us what's going on, what's working for you, what isn't, because that's the best way we can all be better. So
100%. Again, Terry, Netta, thank you so much again for the work, your support of resiliency for the United States. Just absolutely unbelievable. Your advocacy and again, the study, fantastic work. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Tony, that's another one in the bag, sir. Thank you so much to you as well.
Sure. Great topic. As you said, we could explore this for hours, and this is so central to what the Center for Internet Security does. I'm sure there'll be more to say both here and through other means at CIS.
Well, thank you, Tony. Another great episode. And to our audience, thank you so much. Subscribe to us in all the usual ways. Catch us on YouTube at The CI Security. And with that, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the podcast today.
The thoughts and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are solely theirs and do not necessarily reflect those of CIS.
Tune in on Wednesdays for a new episode. And in the meantime, visit our website at cisecurity.org.
Together, we'll continue our efforts of creating confidence in the connected world.